I think it's really important to drive home the point that increased welfare does not mean you're making the life easier for the animal. In some cases, it's actually the opposite. We're making the life more challenging for that individual. Right. Sort of a human example is like you have a kid who, grows up, has to work for some things, studies really hard to make school, to make college and whatnot. And then you have a kid who's a spoiled brat who lives maybe with a rich family and they get everything they want. Now, at the end of the day, 25 years later, typically the better integrated person into society is the person who had to work and learn and had challenges. And that person actually probably has an increased welfare based off all of that. So that is really important to understand that the greatest hole in the world theory is the opposite of welfare because you're making everything way too easy. So Lori, maybe you want to jump in on that.
Yeah, I wrote down some notes as everyone was talking. And so I guess I'll start first with kind of the last thing TC was talking about, which was the animal's brain and not being able to use it to the extent under captive management that they would in the wild. And I think it's really important for caretakers not to mistake lethargy for relaxation and comfort. So oftentimes, especially with reptiles, I see learned helplessness and I see them being lethargic. That is not the same thing as being comfortable and relaxed. Those are two very different things. So when animals aren't able to perform species typical behaviors, or when they aren't able to expend energy, whether that's physical energy or mental energy on novel things under captive management, they can go one of two directions. They can start exhibiting stereotypies within the enclosure, which would be the glass pacing, the edging, the nose rubbing, some of the other things that we see in reptiles, or they can just give up and become lethargic and sit there and do nothing. And that's also termed it can be learned helplessness. So we don't want to mistake that behavior for, the animal's relaxed and content because it's just sitting there. One of the other things that came up was the muscle development. And the brain's a muscle, so I definitely feel it's important that we give them mental stimulation. But I've also taken in snakes here that have had a very flaccid body. You pick them, they just feel soft and kind of, you can tell they don't have good muscular development. And then after they've been here a few weeks and they've been allowed to free roam in some of our exercise areas, and I pick them up, it's almost frightening when you feel how strong they are and how solid they feel. I'm like, wow, I'm glad this snake is tame and it's not out to get me, because it could really hurt me how strong it is right now. And it's a night and day difference when they're allowed to get that physical exercise. And I don't know how to measure play behavior in reptiles, especially snakes, but I've had a snake, our dryer went out and I put a clothesline up to dry clothes until we got a new dryer. One of the snakes left the exercise area one night, and he climbed back and forth across this clothesline like 6 times. And it was frightening because this was Bredli, and they're pretty thick. He's about a 6-foot Morelia Bredli. And I thought, why is he doing that? I thought maybe he was just using it as a means to get somewhere else, but he kept going back and forth. And so was he doing that just to expend energy? Was he doing it for physical exercise? I could see his body muscles like shaking, trying to not fall off the clothesline. And I'm walking beside him in case he does fall, and he didn't fall. And so why are they doing these behaviors when we give them the opportunity? Is it because males roam more in the wild looking for females? Is it because they find it reinforcing to expend that physical energy? Was that mentally stimulating for him? I don't always know the why, but when I see an animal choosing to do a behavior, I allow them to do that behavior more because they are choosing to do that. It didn't hurt me to let him go back and forth across the clothesline. And that brings me to something that both Mariah and TC alluded to, which was it's not hurting to give the animal more. Mm-hmm. So why would you just not do that? We work with a lot of snake species here, and every single one of them has a humid hide with damp sphagnum moss inside. Species that people think don't need a lot of water or humidity or anything. I give every snake one because why not? It doesn't hurt me to go to the dollar store and buy a container and cut a hole in it and put sphagnum moss in it. And every single snake that we have here, which is a lot, uses their humid hides, even species that you're told don't need that. And it doesn't hurt me at all to throw one in every enclosure. Like, how does that put me out? It doesn't. And I'm going to always assume that reptiles have high cognition and experience emotions until that's proven otherwise, because it doesn't hurt me to do that. But if I assume they don't have feelings, they don't have emotions, they don't have higher cognition, and I treat them like property, and then we find out later that they do experience emotions, I'm going to feel horribly bad because I didn't treat them right. So it doesn't hurt us to treat them well. I mean, how does that put us out? And if that does put you out, then maybe you shouldn't have a living animal that you're caring for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is very well said. I totally agree. And I think we all are in the same boat there. It is fascinating in that sense where quite often we are the ones, and I've said this before, that we're the ones that are burdened to provide the evidence to increase welfare, when it really ought to be the other way around, where the people that are keeping them in very unenriched, sterile conditions. You guys have deviated as far as possible from the wild. How come it's us that has to prove that enrichment and some natural replication behaviors is important for the animals? It's kind of bizarre that way. So Joe, maybe you want to jump in.